The young and the restless spoilers, the standoff. Ian Ward stood victorious, his chest heaving with adrenaline as he clenched the stolen gun in his hand. The chaos in the room felt like an electric storm, charged with fear, desperation, and the unsettling realization that he had seized control. The guard, disarmed and trembling, stumbled backward, hands raised in surrender, his eyes darting toward Ian's shaking but determined hand. "Everyone stays back," Ian roared, his voice echoing across the cold, sterile walls of the Newman Enterprises headquarters. The barrel of the gun hovered dangerously close to Nikki Newman's head as Ian gripped her neck with his free arm, dragging her backward as his human shield. Nikki's breaths came out shallow and ragged, her usual composure shattered by the metallic sensation of the gun pressing into her temple. Her knees felt weak, but Ian's iron grip kept her upright. She wanted to scream, to plead, but the cold edge of reality choked her words. Tears welled in her eyes as her mind replayed every regret, every misstep that had brought her to this moment. "Don't try anything stupid, or she's gone," Ian barked, his tone venomous, his eyes scanning the room for any hint of defiance. Victor Newman stood a few feet away, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. The patriarch of the Newman family was a man known for his unshakable authority, his control over every situation. But now, with the love of his life in Ian's hands and a gun aimed at her head, he was powerless. Rage burned in his eyes, but he dared not act impulsively. This wasn't just business or rivalry anymore, this was survival. Nick Newman, Victor's son, mirrored his father's fury. His jaw tightened, and his every instinct screamed at him to launch himself at Ian, to wrest the gun away and put an end to this nightmare. But Nick wasn't reckless enough to risk his mother's life. His hands hovered uselessly at his sides, trembling with frustration. Michael Baldwin, the family's trusted attorney and loyal ally, stood frozen. Logic was his weapon, strategy his strength, but in the face of Ian's erratic behavior, logic had no place. "You're insane," Nick finally spat, his voice trembling with fury. "You're not getting away with this." Ian sneered, tightening his grip on Nikki. "Oh, I think I already have," he said. "Now, here's how this is going to go. You're going to get me a helicopter, immediately. No delays, no tricks, or she dies. Do you understand?" Victor's voice was a low growl as he replied, "You'll get what you want. Just don't hurt her." Nikki's wide, tear-filled eyes darted toward Victor. "Victor," she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't do this, you're going to be fine, Nikki," Victor said, his tone firm, though his heart was breaking. "I'll make sure of it." Ian cackled, his laugh sharp and cruel. "Touching, really. But save the melodrama for later, Victor. Right now, I need your people moving." He gestured toward the nearest Newman employee with the barrel of the gun. "You. Call for the helicopter. Now." The room was a storm of suppressed panic as Victor nodded at his staff to follow Ian's demands. The request for a helicopter was relayed, but Victor had his own plans brewing beneath his calm facade. This was his company, his turf, and no one, not even Ian Ward, would escape unscathed. Desperation mounts Nikki's sobs became audible as Ian continued to drag her toward the nearest window, positioning himself so he could see any approaching threats. "You're all so predictable," he sneered. The great Victor Newman, brought to his knees by little old me. "It's poetic, really." "You won't win, Ian," Michael said, his voice carefully measured, trying to keep Ian talking and distracted. "You think you're in control, but this won't end well for you." Ian's eyes flicked toward Michael, his lips curling into a smirk. "Oh, spare me the lawyer's speech. I'm leaving here, and I'm taking her with me. And just so you all know, I'm not leaving alone." Victor's heart sank as Ian delivered his next demand. "You're going to load that family jet of yours, Victor. Not just the helicopter. The jet. I'll need something a bit more, long distance. And I'm taking Tessa and Arya with me." Gasps rippled through the room. Tessa Porter, a young musician and friend of the Newmans, was already a victim of Ian's schemes in the past, and Arya, Mariah and Tessa's infant daughter, had nothing to do with this madness. But Ian's brazenness knew no bounds. Absolutely not. Nick shouted, stepping forward before Victor placed a firm hand on his shoulder to hold him back. "Don't be a hero, Nick," Ian said with a mocking tone. "I've got all the leverage here, remember? You'll do as I say." Nikki's voice was barely a whisper now. "Please, Victor, don't let him take me." Victor locked eyes with Nikki, his gaze filled with unspoken promises. "I won't," he said, his voice steady. But deep inside, he knew time was running out. The tension peaks outside, the sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air signaled that Ian's first demand had been met. His grin widened as he pulled Nikki closer, dragging her toward the exit. "This is how it's going to work," Ian announced. "You're going to escort me to the helicopter, no funny business. Then we'll go to the airstrip, board that jet, and I'll be out of your lives forever." Victor took a step forward, his voice low and controlled. "You'll get what you want, Ian. Just let Nikki go. She's not part of this." Ian tilted his head, pretending to consider the offer. "Tempting, Victor. But no. Nikki's my insurance. And frankly, I'm enjoying her company." Nikki whimpered, her body trembling against Ian's iron grip. She felt utterly helpless, her faith in those around her crumbling with every passing second. Victor had always been her savior, her protector, but now even he seemed powerless. The hopelessness was suffocating. The plan unfolds unbeknownst to Ian. Victor had already set his countermeasures into motion. Outside, a team of highly trained security personnel was positioning themselves around the building. Every move was being calculated, every second accounted for. As Ian forced Nikki toward the helicopter, Victor's voice rang out one final time. "Ian," he said, his tone dangerously calm. "You've made your move. Now it's my turn." Before Ian could react, a deafening sound shattered the tension. A flash grenade, deployed by Victor's security team, filled the air with light and sound. Ian cried out, momentarily disoriented, as Nikki broke free from his grip. Chaos erupted as the security team swarmed in, overpowering Ian before he could recover. The gun fell from his hand, clattering to the floor, and Victor rushed to Nikki's side, pulling her into his arms as she collapsed against him, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's over," Victor whispered, holding her tightly. "You're safe now." Ian Ward, his plan foiled, was dragged away in handcuffs, his cries of protest drowned out by the roaring helicopter above. The Newman family stood united once more, shaken but unbroken, as the nightmare finally came to an end. This marks the end of one chapter in the Newman family saga, but the scars left by Ian Ward would take much longer to heal. As always in Genoa City, peace was only ever temporary. The final gambit. Ian Ward's plan was meticulous, calculated down to the smallest detail. The helicopter was en route, the Newman family jet was being prepared, and every one of his demands had been met. To the casual observer, it seemed inevitable that Ian would vanish without a trace, leaving chaos and destruction in his wake. But for those who truly knew Victor Newman, this was far from over. Victor Newman wasn't the kind of man to simply hand over his dignity, his family, or his pride. He had faced adversaries like Ian before, men who thought they were clever, who believed their schemes were bulletproof. And time after time, Victor had proven one unshakable truth: no one outmaneuvers Victor Newman. As Ian paced near the makeshift helipad with Nikki still trembling in his grasp, Victor's mind was racing. His face betrayed nothing but cool determination, but beneath that calm exterior, his brain was a supercomputer processing every angle, every possible move. He had anticipated this moment long before Ian had even stepped into the building. The battle wasn't just physical, it was mental, a game of strategy and deception. And Victor had no intention of losing. Ian's laughter filled the tense air as the sound of the helicopter's blades grew louder, signaling its arrival. His confidence was palpable, radiating with the arrogance of a man who believed he had won. The look of helplessness on Victor's face, the fury in Nick's eyes, and the stunned silence of everyone else only fed his ego. "Victor," Ian called out mockingly, his grip on Nikki tightening. "You've always been a worthy opponent, I'll give you that. But even you have to admit when you've been beaten. Don't worry, I'll take good care of Nikki, Tessa, and the baby. They'll all be comfortable." He smirked, his words dripping with malice. Victor didn't flinch, didn't react. He simply stared at Ian, his dark eyes burning with unspoken promises. "Ian," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "you've made one fatal mistake." "Oh?" Ian tilted his head, intrigued but unconcerned. "And what's that?" "You underestimated me." The Newman counterattack. The helicopter landed, its deafening roar creating a wall of noise as the wind whipped through the rooftop. Ian began backing toward it, dragging Nikki with him. "Move!" he shouted at the Newman family and security team, waving the gun in the air. "Nobody tries anything, or she's dead. Do you hear me?" Victor raised a hand, signaling his people to stay back. Every movement he made was calculated, deliberate. "You'll get what you want, Ian," he said, his tone eerily calm. "But remember, nothing in this world comes without a price." Ian laughed, stepping closer to the helicopter. "Oh, I know all about prices, Victor. And today, you're the one paying. Say goodbye to your wife, your dignity, and your precious little empire." But just as Ian reached the helicopter's door, something changed. The pilot, Victor's pilot, turned to look at Ian, his face betraying no emotion. In one swift motion, the pilot pulled out a concealed stun gun and fired. The taser hit Ian squarely in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground, the gun flying from his hand. The moment Ian hit the floor, Victor's security team surged forward like a well-oiled machine. Within seconds, Ian was restrained, his plans collapsing around him. He screamed in frustration, thrashing against the team holding him down. "No. You can't do this. I had everything." Ian bellowed, his voice raw with desperation. "This isn't how it was supposed to go." Victor stepped forward, looming over the defeated man with a look of quiet triumph. "Ian," he said, his voice cold and cutting, "you should have known better than to think you could beat me. This is my world. You don't make the rules here, I do." Nikki collapsed into Victor's arms, sobbing uncontrollably as the tension finally broke. "You did it, Victor," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved me." Victor held her close, his gaze never leaving Ian. "No one threatens my family and gets away with it," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. The aftermath. Ian Ward, once so confident in his victory, was dragged away by security, his shouts echoing into the night. The helicopter lifted off moments later. Not with Ian on board, but with Victor's men taking control of the scene. The Newman family gathered in a quiet corner of the rooftop, still shaken but undeniably relieved. Nick approached his father, his face a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "How did you know?" he asked. "How did you have all this set up?" Victor allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. A man like Ian Ward doesn't operate without a backup plan. "So, I made sure to have a few of my own." "You should always be prepared, son. Always." Nikki, still trembling, looked up at Victor with tears in her eyes. "You're amazing," she said, her voice barely audible. Victor cupped her face gently. "You're safe now, Nikki. That's all that matters." The legacy of the battle. The showdown between Ian Ward and Victor Newman became the stuff of legend in Genoa City. It wasn't just another skirmish between two rivals, it was a reminder of Victor's unrelenting dominance, his ability to outthink and outmaneuver even the most cunning adversaries. Ian's defeat was absolute, his humiliation a stark contrast to the grand escape he had envisioned. And though the scars of the ordeal would linger for Nikki, Tessa, and the rest of the Newman family, they had emerged stronger, more united than ever. For Victor, the victory wasn't just about saving his family, it was about reinforcing the unshakable truth that had defined his life: in his world, no one wins but Victor Newman. Who will you bet on? In the epic battle of wits and wills between Ian Ward and Victor Newman, the answer is clear. Ian may have been clever, but Victor was always one step ahead. As the dust settled and Genoa City returned to its uneasy calm, one question remained: what price would Ian's failure, and Victor's victory, bring next? Because in Genoa City, peace is never permanent. And for Victor Newman, the fight is never truly over.